On the fourth Friday of each month, from February to November, the museum puts on a talk, and you can watch the videos. They're published on YouTube. Subscribe, it's free, and click the bell, and you'll be notified when the videos become available. Thank you for watching.
Welcome. Wonderful crowd today to hear Ross, and particularly on the eve of Anzac Day. Pompey Elliott was a brave, highly distinguished soldier in World War I, born and brought up in Ballarat. No one was more instrumental in turning looming defeat into stunning victory at both Polygon Wood and Villers-Bretonneux. And no Australian general more revered by those he led or more famous outside his own command.
Did I tell you that?
No.
I'm
not telling my sources.
No. I was about to say that stuff.
Ross McMullin's extensive biography highlights Elliott's volatility and uncompromising honesty, causing conflict with superiors and limiting his advancement. Through extensive use of personal letters, Ross's book reveals a sensitive, devoted family man, more profoundly affected by the suffering and deaths of his troops. After the war, Elliott entered federal politics as a senator, still fiercely independent. This biography ultimately portrays a heroic but troubled figure, shaped and in many ways haunted by the war. Ross McMullin himself here today is a leading Australian historian, educated at Australian National University, who combines scholarly rigour with accessible storytelling. In addition to Pompey Elliott, his publications explore themes of leadership, character, and the Australian experience in times of conflict and change. Through his work, Ross has played a significant role in deepening public understanding of Australia's past and making complex history engaging and human. Much of his work draws heavily on letters, particularly the Pompey Elliott, and archival sources to reveal the human side of historical figures. Widely awarded, Ross has made a significant contribution to understanding Australia's past through engaging and carefully researched writing. His books fall into two main strands: World War I biographies and Australian political history. And some of his books are here on display today. So I'd like you to give you a warm welcome to Pompey Elliott. You've just become one.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary Lou. Well, this talk involves reading out a lot of Pompey's letters, so I'm going to do my best to sound very like him. So that's very appropriate. Yeah. Thank you again for that intro. It's lovely to be here. As for previous books and the political aspect that Mary Lou mentioned, I'll just drop this in at the beginning and then move on in case anyone's potentially interested. But I was the author of the ALP centenary history called The Light on the Hill in 1991, and I've expanded and rewritten that, and it's to be launched by the Prime Minister in 3 months. The Light on the Hill, ALP history, if anyone's interested. Now, Pompey. I wrote initially a biography of Pompey, 2002, that came out. And Mary Lou referred to that book. But the one I'm talking about today is my second book on Pompey, which is a book about his letters. Pompey Elliott at War, in his own words. Now, it's different from the previous biography of Pompey. That earlier book was a life and times story covering his whole life, but today's talk is about the later book that is not a biography, It's not life and times, and it's not his whole life. The focus is on this celebrated Australian's experience of World War I in his own words. I'm not aware of another book quite like this one, for two main reasons: the way I've gone about it and the way Pompey expressed himself. The way I've gone about it is to go beyond Pompey's rich letters and diaries. I've assembled his words from wherever I could find them, not just his personal letters and diaries, but also his battle reports, orders, recommendations for awards, military correspondence, official formation diaries, and any other source that illuminated what he wrote and said. I then selected excerpts from these various sources and arranged them in a sequence that becomes a narrative. Now, between these excerpts, I've inserted some brief explanatory links to provide connection and flow, but the fundamental principle underpinning the book is the subtitle, "In His Own Words." It's Pompey at war in his own words. And what remarkable words they are. I can still remember how stunned I was when I first read Pompey Elliott's Remarkable Letters and Diaries 47 years ago. 47 years ago. They were so arrestingly candid and vivid that they bowled me over. The aim of this book is to enable others to have a similar experience. Here's an envelope that contained one of his wartime letters. Now, initially, who was this extraordinary character, Pompey Elliott? Harold Elliott, universally known as Pompey, was Australia's most famous fighting general in World War I, bar none. A charismatic, controversial and highly successful commander, he was exceptional in intellect, genuineness and resolve. An accomplished tactician and astonishingly brave, he was renowned for never sending anyone anywhere he was not prepared to go himself. A fierce disciplinarian with an explosive temper, he was exuberant, wholehearted and utterly dedicated. Pompey identified himself with the formations he commanded and with the men he led. He formed a strong bond with them and cared deeply about what happened to them. Elliott went right through the war, and his leadership was compelling from the outset. He commanded the 7th Battalion at Gallipoli, where he was wounded at the landing. At Lone Pine, under his vigorous frontline leadership, 4 of his men were awarded the Victoria Cross. He led the 15th Brigade at the Western Front, where he was prominent in notable battles such as Fromelles, Polygon Wood and Villers-Bretonneux, together with numerous other engagements, incidents and controversies. No Australian general was more revered by those he led or more famous outside his own command. It was not just the achievements, awards and accolades that made Elliott special, though there were plenty of each. His fame had as much to do with his character and personality, with the style of his leadership, as much as its results. Pompey's tempestuousness generated a host of anecdotes that amused his men and disconcerted his superiors. He was frank and forthright in speech and correspondence, not one for pretence or artifice, and he was no good at guile anyway. Pompey's emotions are starkly evident in his wartime letters. He not only wrote frankly about what happened to him and the men he was commanding, he was also frank about what he felt about what happened to him and the men he was commanding. Pompey was adamant that the war had to be fought and had to be won, and he realised that casualties were inevitable, but again and again he became extremely upset when they eventuated. That these appalling losses had devastating consequences for Australia is frequently evident in his letters. World War I remains the most terrible event in Australia's existence since European settlement. The style of Pompey's words is unique. He wrote rapidly and fluently with fertile imagery, a flair for simile, and an engaging turn of phrase. Some examples to give you a flavour. In 1918, when he proclaimed an order that the next officer caught looting would be summarily and publicly hanged, and looting ceased as a result, and Pompey was a solicitor in civilian life, he concluded that none seemed inclined to make of themselves a test case. After his machine gunners broke up a German attack, the survivors of the enemy column concluded that they had urgent business elsewhere. When his men were victorious in another engagement, he noted that enemy infantry were heading for the skyline at a pace that suggested they were making straight for Berlin to tell the Kaiser about it. Unimpressed by German tactics in 1918, he observed that the whole military ability of the Teutonic race has advanced no plan beyond the instinct of an infant grasshopper. He sent an officer to a vital position at Lone Pine with a memorable farewell. This is front line, they're under fire. "Goodbye, Simons. I don't expect to see you again, but we must not lose that post." What Lieutenant Simons then did at that critical post was so outstanding that he was awarded the VC. Pompey would roar at incompetent officers. "Call yourself a soldier. You're not even a wart on a soldier's ass." And he would reassure his wife Kate that he'd stopped swearing. "Darling, I would pass for a Sunday school teacher anywhere at present." His letters and diaries are lively and absorbing, not only because of his turn of phrase, but also because he was so outspoken, especially in controversy, and Pompey was often in controversy. Newly promoted to command a brigade, commanded a battalion at Gallipoli, promoted to command a brigade at the Western Front, he was appalled by the calibre of the battalion commanders he had been allotted. "Do you desire an efficient brigade, or will any old thing do?" Unwise British dispositions in a vital sector forbade us to hope that any intelligent military action could reasonably be expected from any of them from the corps commander down. He declared after the stunningly successful counter-attack at Villers-Bretonneux that he had to fight everybody to get permission to do it, and when it was done they were all breaking their necks to get or share the credit. Moreover, he nailed General Birdwood, the British commander of the Australian forces, he nailed General Birdwood as being full of a pretended affability that he imagines deceives us. When this mask disappeared during an argument, Elliott described how Birdwood commenced to chatter and gibber like a demented monkey and then flounced out with a retinue of commanders like a cock wren in his harem. They approached the shore, a machine gun opened, the bullets singing by. Soon they got the range. Men crumpled up where they sat, riddled through and through. The boat sides were pierced, the water squirted in, but the boat still swept on unswerving from her course, the rowers with their backs to the fire, never missing a stroke, albeit they felt each one in imagination in the small of the back, till they fell back dead and another snatched the oar from their dying grasp. A little red-headed laddie named MacArthur, scarcely more than 18, was shot through the femoral artery and the blood spurted from his thigh as the water squirted into the boat, but in a crimson jet instead of a silver one. A sergeant attempted to bind it up. "It's no use, Sarge," he cried, "I'm done." Yet he rode on until he swooned from loss of blood and a comrade took his place. The water gained in the boat and flowed all around them, its blue turning a ghastly red with the blood of the wounded and dying. Still the hellish hail of fire continued. It did not cease when the boat grounded, but swept over them still, piercing the writhing bodies through and through. Oh, those leaden minutes of agony, how slowly, how dreadfully they passed by. Okay, I repeat, he wrote that more than 3 years after the events he was describing. I meant to put that up earlier. That's 7th Battalion going ashore at Gallipoli. After Pompey's return to his battalion, it was directed to occupy the front line at Steele's Post. Now this is an image of Steele's Post. Now the front line at Steele's Post is up the top of the hill in the right-hand far corner. That's the front line. This is the backdrop to it. Yeah. The Turks got up 2 heavy howitzers, one firing high explosive and the other common shell. And for the past week, our trenches have been a hell upon earth. The trenches were not trenches anymore, but mere gaping holes in the earth. Men were blown to pieces by shells or crushed to death by the masses of earth blown down upon them. But Katie, the boys are wonderful. They stick it out, and the call for picks and shovels or stretcher bearers never fails to be answered, though often another shell sends these willing workers into eternity. I am proud of them all, Katie, but oh, my heart is breaking to see them. My hair is nearly quite grey with the worry and grief of it all to see them dying so. We are like men under sentence of death, for every day takes its toll of us. We've lost nearly 200 men since I last wrote to you. I am in excellent bodily health, but I am broken-hearted at the loss of my brave boys. This is an awful war. Next month, Pompey and his men were involved in the ferocious fighting at Lone Pine. Four of his men were awarded the VC for what they did there. Pompey told a lawyer friend what it was like to be at Lone Pine. The weather was hot and the flies pestilential. When anyone speaks to you of the glory of war, picture to yourself a narrow line of trenches, 2 and sometimes 3 deep with bodies, and think too of your best friends, for that is what these boys become by long association with you, mangled and torn beyond description by the bombs and bloated and blackened by decay and crawling with maggots. Live amongst this for days. This is war, and such is glory, whatever those novelists may say. Now, after Lone Pine, during one of Pompey's regular frontline inspections, he had a long-range shot himself. A private alongside, observing through a periscope and keen to please his colonel, cried, "Got him, sir!" But Pompey wasn't conned. "Got him, be damned! The bullet's not halfway there!" After Gallipoli, Pompey was promoted to command the 15th Brigade, and he and his men went to France. In July 1916, they became involved in the disaster of Fromelles, which I've been saying initially in 1996, and now it's universally accepted, well, widely accepted, as the worst 24 hours in Australian history since European settlement. Battle of Fromelles. 5,533 Australian casualties in one night. That is, the Australian casualty toll at Fromelles was equivalent to the entire Australian casualties in the whole of the Boer War, the Korean War and the Vietnam War put together in one night at Fromelles. And 1/3 of them, 1,804, were in Pompey Elliott's brigade. Afterwards he was scathing about what he described as the useless slaughter. This is Jeff McRae, the widely admired commander of the 60th Battalion, who was killed at Fromelles, leading his men forward across no man's land. God knows why this enterprise was ordered, apparently as a feint, to distract the enemy's attention from the Somme area. Whatever the reason was, the division was hurled at the German trenches without anything like adequate preparation. The slaughter was dreadful, and at length we were ordered to retire, and one of the best of my battalion commanders, that's Jeff McRae he's referring to, one of the best of my battalion commanders was killed, and practically all my best officers are dead. I presume there was some plan at the back of the attack, but it is difficult to know what it was. One can only say it was an order. I trust those who gave the order may be made to realise their responsibility. Out of Jeff McRae's battalion of nearly 1,000 men and 22 officers, at roll call next day, I could only get one officer and 106 men unwounded. This is Charles Bean, the Australian official correspondent who was to become Australia's official historian after the war. Charles Bean was a very tall man with extremely long legs. So that's why I've got the photo there. Extremely long legs, so there's a great deal of mud there. It was a terrible, soul-destroying winter, 1916-17 winter. My poor boys have been having a dreadful time. It rained very hard the last 2 days, and all today it has been freezing hard. I am very worried about it all. I've tried to work out ways of sending hot food up to the line. I've so much on my mind that I'm afraid I cannot write much of a letter to you, even to you. It is dreadful that these poor boys have to suffer like this. Fancy a 6-foot trench, half full of muddy slush, in which you have to live for 3 days at a time. During all that time, you can't lay down to rest. You can only snatch a little sleep by cutting a nick in the bank and sitting in it with your feet propped up as best you can. It is either raining or freezing every night. In the last hour of 1916, Pompey's mood was bleak. I do miss poor Jeff McRae very much. He had a particularly bright, happy disposition. He, Cedric Permazil and the Henderson boys, both of them, and Jimmy Johnston, were all animated with a wonderful personal loyalty to myself, and now all are gone. I shall not look upon their like again, that is certain. If I myself should fall in France, I should like to be buried near poor Jeff. At the end of winter, the Germans carried out a strategic retreat to their heavily fortified Hindenburg line. Now, 2 advanced guards were formed to harass the retreat in the AIF sector, and Pompey Elliott was chosen to lead one of them. His formation proceeded to advance successfully across open country, such an uplifting contrast to the depressing boggy trenches they'd left behind them. And Pompey's morale was similarly transformed. My word, Katie, my boys have been making a name for themselves. They far outreached the British and even the other Australians, and for 3 whole days we were absolutely forbidden to advance one step further to allow the others to catch up on each side of us. Even the army commander, General Gough, actually came along yesterday to see us. And several days before, he sent his staff officer to take notes of my methods of attack, which were simply paralysing the old Bosch. Throughout the war, he kept asking urgently for information about his children. Letter after letter, over and over again. Here's an example in mid-1917 to Kate. Tell me all about the wee people. Tell me everything about their hair and cheeks and chin and everything. I can never hear enough of them. In 1917, Pompey's brigade was involved at Bullecourt and later Polygon Wood. This is Polygon Wood you're looking at. The Battle of Polygon Wood was intended to be this is important, the Battle of Polygon Wood was intended to be a combined attack involving Australian and British formations on the 26th of September, but the Germans had other ideas. The Germans knew we were going to attack soon, so they thought to disarrange our plans by attacking us, and after a fearful bombardment attacked at dawn of the 25th and came on in thousands. My boys of the 58th Battalion were in the front line, and despite dreadful casualties stood firm, but the British battalion alongside could not stand, and they broke and ran. Now, this German breakthrough alongside the 15th Brigade, I should emphasise here, no implicit criticism of those British blokes who weren't able to linger in the front line. This was an extraordinarily heavy bombardment, extraordinarily heavy. Probably the heaviest they'd endured, either the Australians or the British who were involved in it. Had to make that clear, but the German breakthrough alongside the 15th Brigade caused substantial problems for Pompey and his men, obviously. All the more when the 98th British Brigade claimed that it had regained its front line when it had not. Okay, so 58th Battalion, our blokes in the front line, Pompey's back at his brigade headquarters. The equivalent on the British side is the 98th British Brigade, and they reported to their superiors further back, and also told Pompey, which was ludicrous, but because his men were still there and they could see what was happening. Yeah, the 98th British Brigade claimed that it had regained its front line when it had not. Afterwards, conventionally, commanders write official reports of battles. No one wrote a report, no Australian, I suspect no one in any country, wrote an official report like Pompey Elliott's report about Polygon Wood. Extraordinary document. And in it, there was one sentence. And, you can imagine official battle report, conventionally pretty bland sort of document, keep controversy to a minimum. This is a sentence of Pompey's report about what happened as far as his view as superiors of his British unit alongside was concerned. Quote, "No reliable information whatever could be got from the 98th Brigade as to the situation on their front or even as to the situation of their troops." It's basically saying they had no idea where their men were. Yeah? Nevertheless, Pompey's superiors insisted that the planned attack on the 26th still had to proceed. No doubt influenced by the 98th Brigade reporting back, our blokes have retained the front line, and perhaps predictably, the British superiors who were making the big calls, they preferred to believe what the 98th British Brigade commander told them than what they were getting from this, Australian who was very, very different, unorthodox. Nevertheless, Pompey's superiors insisted that the planned attack on the 26th had to proceed, even though the Germans had comprehensively disrupted the arrangements. Pompey felt appalled at the task, his words. In particular, he was unconvinced by the assurances he was given that the British would move forward alongside his men overnight in the dark and regain their front line and then advance alongside. And his scepticism was vindicated after his men began their advance. Suddenly the mist lifted and it was seen that the British had not come on at all, and that instead there was a widely opening gap nearly a mile deep on our right. His blokes going forward, British not there, Germans are there, firing that way, far more dangerous, that way. This caused further immense difficulties for Pompey and his brigade, and while he was directing this complex battle, he received distressing news. "I heard that my brother George had been mortally wounded. He had been struck by a fragment of shell on the head and back and could not recover." This is George. George had graduated in Melbourne Uni as a doctor. He was a top footballer. He captained university when it was in the VFL, precursor to the AFL. Represented Victoria, interstate football. Very talented man, George Elliott. So he's not far away, but Pompey can't go to him, though he's told he's dying. Yeah? Pompey felt swamped with grief for George, who was not far away. "They brought the news to me when I was tied to my office directing the fight, and I could not go to him, though they said he was dying. I hope never to have such an experience again. The effort to concentrate my thoughts on the task of defeating the enemy as the messages came through, revealing each move and the changing phases of the battle, to me seemed as time went on to turn me into stone, and half the time I was like a man sleepwalking. Not only that, moreover, during the battle, Pompey also received alarming news about his solicitor's practice back in Melbourne. Ah, Katie, as if my other troubles were not enough. I was told that Mr. Roberts has been speculating and lost his money and has been making me liable through the partnership for thousands of pounds of his debts, about £5,000 altogether." Now, what's that worth now? $500,000? Something like that? "Try not to worry, darling. It is a bitter blow to me. I think I could have the villain put in jail, but it would only cause a scandal and probably ruin the business without releasing me from debt in the slightest." Now, despite these shocks, Pompey's dynamic leadership, which included a famous frontline visit that sorted out the confusion and revived the attacking impetus, paved the way for an outstanding victory at Polygon Wood, as the men he led secured his brigade's objectives and those of the British alongside as well. Extraordinary achievement. "We have had a wonderful battle and a wonderful victory. My boys have simply covered themselves with glory. Many, many have fallen, but we have in this fight stamped our fame on a higher pinnacle than ever. General Plumer says, 'My boys saved the whole British Army.'" Pompey was exhausted after Polygon Wood, but he was sufficiently perturbed about something Kate had mentioned in a recent letter to scrawl a hasty note to his 5-year-old son. He said, "I'm too tired, darling, to even write to you," but there was something that she'd mentioned recently that was critical, that he had to urgently attend to. So he wrote this: "My dear little laddie, Mum has been telling me that you were so sorry for being naughty that you wished you were a little girl like Violet. But if you ever changed to a little girl, Dido and Mum would not have any little boy at all. And Mum and Dido would be dreadfully sad if they had no dear, wee, mischiefy thing like our laddie. Dear little chap, Mum and Dido love you so much that they don't mind very much when you are naughty. Of course Mum has to scold you, because if she didn't, you wouldn't know what was naughty and wrong to do. Dido was sad when he heard that the little lad wanted to be changed to a girl. He loves this little laddie so much that he was sorry the poor little chap was not happy. So don't you worry a bit, old chap. You just try your best to be good, and if you forget sometimes and Mum has to spank you, just be a soldier and try not to cry very much, and you will know that Mum and Dido love you just the same even when they spank you. Spanking isn't so bad if you feel quite sure that dear old Mum loves you just always the same. Dear little laddie, I wish I was with you now to take you up on my knee and comfort you and tell you Mum and Dida will always love you. Pompey proceeded to compile, as I said earlier, a typically frank and forthright battle report about Polygon Wood, only to find it suppressed by his British corps commander. It showed some of the British troops up and some of their generals too, and Birdwood ordered all the copies of it destroyed. It was a pity, as I'd taken great pains to get the truth of it, but you see, it is necessary that disasters should be concealed and hushed up. It does not pay to tell the truth, as I know to my cost. However, one copy of this controversial report survived. When I became aware of this, I asked to see it at the Australian War Memorial, but was told it was locked in a safe and accessible to no one. This was 1982. Still rigorously suppressed, 65 years on. Wasn't sure what to do. I had to think, then I thought, there's only one thing I can do here, a Pompey-like tantrum. And as a result, I was eventually allowed to see it. At the end of 1917, Pompey was feeling very melancholy, just like the end of 1916. Here it's the last day of this sad old year, 1917. I think it has held more of sadness and disappointment than any other year of my life. I am particularly in the blues today. It is bitterly cold and there's nearly a couple of feet of snow on the ground. There have been no home letters for more than a month, and having no news, I don't know what position my business is in with Roberts, and it is very worrying. It is very sad not getting any letters. Katie, I am big heap lonely for you. The Germans launched a massive onslaught on the 21st of March 1918. The British were driven back no less than 40 miles, that's 40 miles, a hell of a long way in the context of this, essentially stagnant war for years. And there was widespread concern that the war might be lost. Pompey sensed correctly that this was the climax of the war, and all his drive and verve returned as the Australians were rushed to the rescue. Australians were influencing the destiny of the world in 1918 more than any other year in our history. Yeah. Make a big fuss about 1915, Gallipoli, understandable. 1918 is when we were really influencing things most. Pompey and his brigade were front and centre in these dramatic events, which Will Dyson has depicted in this drawing. My first book, PhD, long ago, was a biography of Will Dyson, who was Australia's first official war artist. This is a classic. No one else was there. No other artist was there, I should say. No other drawing like this exists, reporting what it's like. Now, what it depicts, as you can see, is in the midst of the German massive onslaught, French civilians have had to vacate their homes. And that's the group in the foreground on the right are in the midst of that. And as you can see, it's only middle-aged women, one old bloke and kids. The military-age blokes, they're away fighting or dead. Yeah. So these civilians have been driven out of their homes, and the key to the drawing, in my view, is the raised left hand of the woman on the right there, that you can see. Now, what she is saying with that gesture to other retreating civilians who vacated their homes is, it's okay, we can turn around and reoccupy our homes because I've seen the Australians arrive and they will stop the Germans. Yeah, they will stop the Germans. That's what the drawing is saying. And Dyson was right. They did stop the Germans. Yeah. Very telling drawing. Pompey at the time. The AIF have hitherto accomplished nothing to be compared in importance with the work they have in hand just now. I was never so proud of being an Australian as I am today. The gallant bearing and joyous spirit of the men at the prospect of a fight thrills you through and through. You simply cannot despair or be downhearted, whatever the odds against you. When you feel their spirits rising, the more the danger seems to threaten. It is glorious indeed to be with them. During the crisis, Pompey's brigade was directed to occupy a village called Hedoville. His men marched all night again to get there, but when they got there, they found it occupied by a detachment of British officers and men who weren't supposed to be there. Yeah. Pompey kept his men, who'd marched all night to get there, outside in the rain for hours to enable the British to find out where they were supposed to be going. He returned to the Hedoville chateau at midday and spoke to the British staff officer who was in control there. He told me that his division had moved, and until he got orders from them as to where he was to go, he could not move. I asked him where his division was. He did not know. I asked, had he sent anyone out to find where it was? No. I then saw that the blighter had no intention to move, that they were very comfortable there and didn't want to move, and would take mighty fine care they didn't get orders. So I told him right there and then a few things I'd found out about his division and its fighting and running powers, and wound up by informing him that unless he and his officers and men were clear of the village by 2 o'clock, I would send in an escort of my own men and march them out by force as prisoners. He got a nasty shock and was out of the village by the time fixed. He then had the hide to complain to his division of the way I had treated him. In reply, I let off some more steam and asked that a court of inquiry should investigate the conduct of the British officers and men in the village who'd looted the whole place, including the chateau. That startled them a bit. And the matter was dropped like a hot spud. I just love that. Dropped like a hot spud. So there's a formal one of Pompey, and here he is with his headquarters staff. Now I've got three excerpts to go from his letters, nearly there. In April 1918, the Germans attacked and captured the tactically vital town of Villers-Bretonneux from the British. Pompey and his brigade were nearby, and he was itching to launch a counter-attack. So Villers-Bret, crucial village, gateway to Amiens. So there's a big focus on not losing Amiens, and a big focus, therefore, on not losing Villers-Bret. But the Germans attacked, captured it, drove the British out. Pompey wanted a counter-attack. I submitted the plan for recapture of a town. I was told not to bother, as the British corps concerned were doing it themselves, and it was out of my area. So, for 14 hours we delayed, whilst the Boche strengthened his position, i.e. inside Villers-Bret. Eventually, I was solemnly handed over to the British corps concerned, together with another Australian brigade. No means of communication with each other was provided. By this time it was pitch dark and raining, and we were launched, and our meeting place fixed within the enemy's lines, and we were left to find each other. Everyone expected the whole thing to fail, but something desperate had to be done to restore the situation. In point of fact, it was not nearly as desperate as it looked, for I had taken advantage of those 14 hours' delay to have all my officers and some of the men thoroughly reconnoitre the ground actually during the fight. For the moment the German attack started, I assumed that the British corps would be defeated. Now, this stunning counterattack at night, in the dark, no artillery support, proved a wonderful success. Villers-Bretonneux, brilliant accomplishment. Pompey writing home after the battle. Birdwood and the French general said that nothing like it had been done in the war. Birdwood really tried to be nice to me yesterday when he came round about the splendid way my boys had behaved, but he rather looked as if I'd made him swallow a bit of green apple. I wore my old Australian jacket and looked as disreputable as I could too. It's a joke on these spick and span soldiers to show them that Australians have a few brains sometimes. Soon afterwards, 3 Australian divisional commands became vacant. Now, little recap. Pompey had been commanding the 15th Brigade well for 2 years, very, very successfully for 2 years. Divisional command's the next level up. There are 3 vacancies there. And he and his admirers thought he had strong claims to be promoted, but he was overlooked. He was bitterly disappointed and aggrieved, and had an argument about it with Birdwood's senior staff officer, General White. Has a controversial interaction with someone or other, and then afterwards describes it to Gate, word for word. Word for word. White said General Birdwood would not promote me. I asked why, and pointed to my services. The Pompey advance, which is now lectured on as a classic example of advance guard, on the Bully Court show, on the Polygon Wood show, and lastly on this Villers-Bretonneux stunt, which is supposed to be the finest thing the Anzacs have ever done in the war, and some say the finest thing done in the war at all. And Lone Pine too. He admitted all that and said they had no general braver or more capable than the AIF. No general braver or more capable than the AIF. Yeah. But I suffered from lack of control of judgment. Pressed to say what he meant, he could only say that I break out like a volcano if things don't go just as I want them. He mentioned about the row I had with Birdwood in Egypt, and also the other row in Egypt when they wouldn't give my men water and I threatened to march them back into town to get it. Then at Fromelles, when the British didn't advance and my men got cut to pieces, I kicked up a row and got a general sacked and caused a lot of unpleasantness. Then at Polygon Wood, when my big report exposed the Tommies regiments who bolted and left my 58th boys to fight alone. The same almost at Bully Court, the same down here. Then, the row I had with a young staff officer who kept all my brigade out in the rain until it suited him to get up about 10 a.m. in the morning after we'd marched all night. Then, when we got down here, I found British officers stealing champagne wholesale and I arrested them and threatened to shoot them if it did not stop. For I could not stop my men stealing wine if the officers would persist. Now that seems to have led to a row. Now, would you believe it possible that they are now dragging all this up to show I am not fit for a higher job? It is amazing and incredible. I should have thought that taking this in conjunction with my fighting powers, which he admits are not approachable, it would have proved that I was the very man for the job. But there you are, Katie. I have done only my duty, as my men will testify for always. Thank you very much.